The sun hung low in the sky as we pulled up to the campsite, the golden light filtering through the towering pines that surrounded us. The air was thick with the rich scent of pine needles and damp earth, a refreshing change from the concrete jungle we left behind. I could feel the excitement bubbling inside me as I turned to my friends, Emily and Tyler, who were already jumping out of the car, eager to explore. "Last one to set up their tent has to cook dinner," Emily shouted playfully, her laughter echoing through the trees. "Bring it on," I replied, already grabbing my gear. The thrill of the challenge ignited a fire within me, but as I glanced at Tyler, I noticed a shadow of hesitation in his eyes. "Tyler, you good?" I asked, trying to gauge what was on his mind. "Yeah, just thinking about those local legends," he mumbled, his voice trailing off. Emily rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on. Those are just stories to scare tourists. You know, crazy tales about creatures that look like humans. Please, it's all just a bunch of nonsense." "Maybe, but still." Tyler's voice was distant, almost as if he was caught between believing the stories and dismissing them. I could see his brow furrowed with concern, and it made me uneasy. We quickly set up our tents, the sounds of zippers and rustling fabric filling the air. As the sun dipped below the horizon, we gathered around a crackling campfire, the flames dancing and casting flickering shadows that played tricks on our minds. "Okay, who's got the best ghost story?" Emily challenged, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Let me tell you about the Whispering Woods," I began, my voice dropping into a low, spooky tone. "They say that if you listen closely at night, you can hear the whispers of those who got lost in the forest. They're searching for someone to join them." "Stop it, Jake. You're scaring me," Emily laughed, even as she edged closer to the fire. Tyler sat a little further back, his gaze shifting to the darkening woods. "You know what they say about the shadows in the trees, right? How sometimes they can hide things that shouldn't be there." "Tyler, don't start," Emily said, rolling her eyes again. "It's all just folklore. If we keep this up, you're going to give yourself a heart attack." "Yeah, man, lighten up," I added. But I could see that his anxiety was only growing. As the night deepened, the forest seemed to come alive with the sounds of rustling leaves and distant animal calls. The wind whispered through the trees, sending chills down my spine. I could feel the tension building in Tyler, his body rigid as he shifted uneasily on his log. "Did you hear that?" Tyler suddenly asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Hear what?" Emily replied, her tone shifting from playful to cautious. "I don't know. It sounded like footsteps," he said, scanning the edge of the woods as if something might leap out at any moment. "It's probably just a deer," I reassured him, though I wasn't entirely convinced myself. The forest was thick with shadows, and every crackle of twigs or rustle of leaves felt ominous. "Yeah, sure," Tyler muttered, his eyes darting nervously, "or something else entirely." Emily laughed, trying to ease the mood. "You guys are being ridiculous. Let's just enjoy the fire and the stars, okay? The only thing we have to worry about is burning the marshmallows." But as the flames danced higher, I could feel a strange energy settling over us. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist, and I found myself glancing toward the darkened woods more often than not. Tyler's anxiety was palpable, a tightrope of fear that threatened to snap. "Let's just promise to stick together, all right?" Tyler finally said, his voice steadying slightly. "No wandering off alone, just in case." "Of course," Emily chimed in, her laughter echoing into the night. "We're all in this together." As we continued to share stories and laughter, I couldn't shake off the sense that something was lurking just beyond the firelight, waiting for the perfect moment to make its presence known. The night was thick with suspense as we sat around the campfire, the flames flickering and casting dancing shadows across our faces. I could feel Tyler's tension rising, his usual bravado slipping away with every crackle of the fire. Emily, ever the jokester, was recounting the local legends, her voice light and teasing. I mean, come on. Creatures disguised as humans? It sounds like a plot twist from a bad horror movie. She laughed, but Tyler just stared into the fire, the flickering light reflecting the unease in his eyes. Maybe it's not so funny, Tyler muttered, breaking his silence. You don't know what's out there. I exchanged a glance with Emily, who shrugged, trying to lighten the mood. What? You think they're going to come for us? We're just here to have fun, remember? But the forest loomed around us, vast and dark, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The wind howled softly, as if trying to whisper secrets we weren't ready to hear. As the night deepened, the sounds of the forest began to shift. The usual rustling of leaves and chirping of crickets felt distorted, almost unnatural. I could see Tyler's discomfort growing, and I felt a pang of concern for my friend. Hey, maybe we should just head to our tents, he suggested suddenly, his voice shaky. I don't like this. Come on. Don't be such a scaredy cat, Emily teased, but I could tell that she, too, felt the tension hanging in the air. Let's just check it out, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. We can't let a few weird noises scare us off, right? With reluctant nods, we grabbed our flashlights and stepped away from the comforting glow of the fire, plunging into the darkness of the woods. The air was thick with an unsettling energy, and every crack of a twig beneath our feet made my heart race. Did you hear that? Emily whispered, her voice barely above a murmur. Yeah, I replied, trying to focus on the path ahead. The noises were becoming more distinct now. A low growl, perhaps, or the sound of something moving just beyond our line of sight. Let's keep going. I want to see what's making that sound, I urged, partly out of curiosity and partly to keep Tyler from retreating further into his fears. As we ventured deeper, we stumbled upon something that made the blood run cold in my veins. Massive footprints pressed into the soft earth, each one larger than my own foot. I knelt beside one, tracing the edge with trembling fingers. What the hell is this? I breathed, glancing up at my friends, who wore matching expressions of horror. Maybe we should turn back, Tyler said, his voice a mere whisper. This isn't right. Before I could respond, a chilling sound echoed through the trees, an eerie, low howl that sent shivers racing down my spine. Okay, yeah, let's head back, I agreed, my earlier bravado evaporating. As we retraced our steps, I felt an oppressive weight settle over us, as if the forest itself was closing in. My heart raced, every shadow seeming to pulse with life. When we finally reached the campsite, however, Tyler was nowhere to be found. Tyler? I called out, panic creeping into my voice. Tyler, where did he go? Emily asked, her eyes wide with fear. I don't know. He was right behind us. I felt the darkness envelop us, amplifying our terror as the shadows danced menacingly around the flickering firelight. Tyler! I shouted again, desperation clawing at my throat. A cold wind swept through the campsite, chilling me to the bone, as though it carried a warning. Just as despair settled in, I thought I saw a figure emerging from the trees, but the laughter that followed was not Tyler's. It was a sound that echoed with malice, threading through the night like a sinister melody, and I felt the world around me shift in ways I could not comprehend. Jake, what do we do? Emily's voice trembled, her eyes darting around, searching the shadows for any sign of our friend. I don't know, I replied, my mind racing. The forest felt alive, as if it was watching us, waiting for our next move. All I could think was that we needed to find Tyler, but deep down, a chilling realization began to settle. Whatever was out there, it felt like it was after more than just him. But the night had swallowed the campsite whole, the darkness wrapping around us like a thick, suffocating blanket. I could sense the weight of fear pressing down on my chest as I called out for Tyler, my voice trembling in the silence. Tyler, where are you? My heart raced, each beat echoing in my ears like a war drum. Emily stood beside me, her face pale, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and confusion. "Maybe he just wandered a little too far," she suggested, but the uncertainty in her voice betrayed her bravado. I could see her glancing uneasily at the trees standing like sentinels around us, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. I shook my head, the gnawing sense of dread clawing at my insides. "No, this isn't right. He should have come back by now," I replied, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. I could feel the cold wind brushing against my face, as if the forest itself was warning us of some impending danger. "We need to find him." With a deep breath, we began our search, our flashlights cutting through the thick darkness, casting eerie shadows that danced along the trunks of the trees. "Tyler," I called again, my voice almost swallowed by the night. The only response was the rustling of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl, mocking our panic with its calm indifference. "Jake, do you think he could have fallen into a ravine or something?" Emily's voice was barely above a whisper. I could see the fear etched on her face, the way her lips trembled as she spoke. "I don't know," I admitted, suppressing the urge to let my imagination run wild. "But we can't just stand here. We have to keep looking." As we ventured deeper into the woods, the atmosphere grew heavier. The sounds of the forest, once comforting, now felt ominous. Every crack of a twig underfoot seemed amplified, echoing the growing anxiety in my heart. I turned to Emily, trying to mask my fear with a semblance of confidence. "He can't be far. He probably just got spooked and is hiding." But deep down, I knew that this wasn't just a simple case of wandering off. The forest seemed alive, as if it were watching us, waiting for something to happen. Just then, we stumbled upon something that stopped us in our tracks. Massive footprints, far too large to belong to any animal I knew, were pressed into the soft earth. My breath caught in my throat. "Jake, what is that?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. I bent down to examine the prints, my mind racing with possibilities. "I don't know, but they're not human," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. The realization sent a shiver down my spine. We were out of our depth, and it felt as though we were trespassing in a realm that didn't welcome intruders. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the trees, and we both jumped. "Tyler!" I shouted again, desperation creeping into my voice. But there was no answer, only the growing silence that enveloped us, thick and suffocating. Hours passed, or so it felt, with us calling out into the darkness, our voices growing hoarse and our hopes dwindling. I could feel the cold wind on my skin, a reminder that time was slipping away. Emily clutched my arm, her expression a mix of fear and determination. "What if we go back to the campsite? Maybe he returned there," she suggested, her voice shaky. "Yeah, let's do that," I agreed. But even as I said it, I felt a sinking feeling in my gut. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. As we retraced our steps, a chill settled over me, one that had nothing to do with the temperature. I felt it in my bones, a sense of foreboding that gnawed at my insides. When we reached the campsite, my heart sank. The fire had burned low, casting flickering shadows that seemed to mock us. "Tyler?" I called again, but the emptiness was our only reply. Just as despair began to settle in, a figure emerged from the shadows. My heart leaped, hope igniting for a brief moment. "Tyler!" I yelled, but as he stepped into the light, my heart sank once more. His eyes were vacant, hollow, as if he were a shell of the person we had known. "Tyler," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. "What happened to you?" He didn't respond, just stood there, his expression blank, as if he were staring through us rather than at us. A cold wind brushed against my face, and I shivered, feeling the weight of an unseen presence pressing down on us. "Are you all right?" I asked, but he remained silent, his gaze unfocused, sending a wave of dread crashing over me. I exchanged a worried glance with Emily, who looked just as frightened as I felt. "Tyler," I pressed, desperation creeping into my voice. Please say something. But he just stood there, a chilling emptiness in his eyes that left me breathless. And then I knew that whatever had taken him into the depths of the forest had also taken something from him. The weight of terror settled heavily in my chest as the darkness closed in around us, and I realized that this was only the beginning of our nightmare. The air was thick with tension as I sat by the flickering fire, glancing uneasily at Tyler. He was different now, a ghost of the person he had been just days before. The way he stared into the flames, as if trying to decipher some unspoken truth, sent shivers down my spine. Emily, perched beside me, attempted to lighten the mood with a half-hearted joke about the camping legends, but it fell flat. "What's wrong with you, man?" I finally asked, breaking the silence that had settled like a heavy fog around our camp. "You've been quiet since you came back." Tyler turned his gaze towards me, his eyes devoid of the usual spark. I don't know, Jake. I've been thinking a lot," he said, his voice low and distant. Emily leaned in, concern etched on her face. "About what? You scared us when you disappeared. You just vanished without a trace." A flicker of anger crossed Tyler's features. "I said I don't want to talk about it," he snapped, the sudden intensity catching us both off guard. I exchanged a worried glance with Emily. This wasn't like Tyler at all. "Look, we're here for each other, okay? Just tell us what happened," I urged gently, hoping to coax him out of his shell. He stood abruptly, the firelight casting unsettling shadows across his face. "You wouldn't understand. None of you would." He turned away from us, crossing his arms as if trying to shield himself from the world. Emily's expression softened. "Tyler, we're your friends. Whatever it is, we can face it together." He shook his head, a hollow laugh escaping his lips. "You think it's that simple? You think you can just wish away what's out there?" I felt a chill creep up my spine as I glanced into the darkness of the woods surrounding us. The trees loomed tall and menacing, their branches swaying even though there was no wind. "What do you mean? What's out there?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Tyler's eyes flickered to a pendant hanging around his neck, catching the firelight for just a moment. I hadn't noticed it before. It was strange, a symbol I didn't recognize, etched into the metal with intricate designs. "Where did you get that?" I inquired, unable to contain my curiosity. He flinched, clutching the pendant tightly as if it burned him. "It's nothing," he muttered, his voice low. "Tyler, it looks significant. Please, just tell us." "Stop asking," he yelled suddenly, the rawness of his voice echoing in the stillness of the night. The forest seemed to respond, an unnerving rustling echoing in the distance. Emily's eyes were wide with fear, and I felt my heart race. "We need to calm down," I said, trying to maintain some semblance of control. Let's just sit down, okay? We don't need to fight." Tyler took a few deep breaths, visibly struggling to rein in his emotions. "I'm sorry," he finally said, his voice cracking. I feel different. After I disappeared, I felt something change." "What do you mean?" I pressed, my heart pounding. "I don't know how to explain it," he said, shaking his head, "but it's like I'm not the same person anymore. Like something is inside me." My stomach churned at the implications of his words. "What are you talking about?" Before he could respond, a sudden noise erupted from the trees, an unnatural rustling that seemed to echo our fears. We all turned to look, the firelight flickering wildly as if in response to an unseen threat. "We should get inside the tents," Emily suggested, her voice trembling slightly. "No," Tyler said firmly, his demeanor shifting again, a darkness creeping into his eyes. "We can't hide. They're already watching us." "What do you mean, they?" I asked, a sense of dread washing over me. The air around us felt charged, a tension that was palpable as Tyler's gaze flicked nervously toward the forest. "The legends," he murmured, almost to himself. "They're real. They know what I've become." "Tyler, you're scaring me," Emily said, her voice almost a whisper now. "I don't want to be scared," he replied, his voice breaking, "but I can't shake it off. It's like I'm being pulled into something dark." The forest seemed to hum with a sinister energy, the shadows stretching and retreating like they were alive. I felt a wave of panic rise within me. "We need to stick together," I insisted, trying to ground us in the chaos of the moment. Tyler's eyes glazed over, distant once more. "Maybe it's already too late," he said quietly, almost as if he were speaking to himself. As the night deepened around us, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had happened to Tyler in the woods was just the beginning of something much more terrifying. The air felt thick with unspoken fears and the weight of an unknown darkness that threatened to swallow us whole. And the air was thick with an unsettling tension as I stood beside Emily, our breaths mingling in the cool night air. Tyler, who had once been our steadfast companion, now felt like a stranger, his eyes reflecting a hollow darkness that sent chills down my spine. I glanced at Emily, her face pale in the dim light of our flickering campfire, and I could see the fear mirrored in her eyes. "Jake, we need to get out of here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "This isn't right. Tyler, he's not himself." I nodded, my heart pounding in rhythm with the distant rustling of the trees. "I know, but where do we go? We can't just leave him." Tyler stood a few paces away, mumbling to himself, the shadows wrapping around him like a shroud. "They're coming. They're all around us," he murmured, his voice barely audible. It sounded like he was speaking to someone or something unseen, and a wave of dread washed over me. "Tyler, what are you talking about?" I called out, trying to reach the friend I once knew. He turned his head slightly, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes before it vanished, replaced by that unsettling emptiness. "They're hungry," he whispered, almost reverently, "and they want you." "Who wants us?" Emily interjected, taking a step closer to me. "We're not afraid of you, Tyler." But the words felt hollow in the air, swallowed by the dark forest that loomed around us. I could hear laughter, chilling, echoing laughter that seemed to come from all directions. It was a sound that crawled under my skin, tightening my chest in fear. "Jake, we need to move." Emily pulled my arm, and I could hear the urgency in her voice. "Now." I hesitated, glancing back at Tyler. The boy I had grown up with felt like a distant memory. "What about him?" I asked, desperation creeping into my tone. "Forget him," she shouted, her face etched with panic. "He's not our friend anymore." Before I could respond, Tyler took a step forward, his expression twisting into something grotesque. "You can't run from them. You have to join us," he said, his voice echoing eerily in the night. "They're waiting." I felt a chill run down my spine, and I grabbed Emily's hand, pulling her away as we stumbled back through the trees. The forest felt alive, the branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The laughter grew louder, wrapping around us like a malevolent fog. "Jake, look!" Emily cried out, pointing into the darkness. I followed her gaze and felt my heart drop. There, just beyond the reach of our flashlights, were figures standing motionless, their distorted features barely visible in the shadows. They seemed to watch us, their eyes glimmering with a predatory hunger that made my skin crawl. "Run!" I yelled, adrenaline surging through my veins. We turned and sprinted, the forest closing in around us. The laughter faded into sinister whispers, echoing in the back of my mind. "Why is this happening?" I gasped, glancing over my shoulder as we plunged deeper into the woods. "What did Tyler do?" "I don't know. I don't know," Emily shouted, her breath coming in quick bursts. "But we can't let them catch us." Suddenly, I stumbled over a root, falling hard onto the forest floor. Emily stopped, her eyes wide with fear. She reached down to help me up, but I could see the terror in her expression morph into something else, something darker. "Jake," she said slowly, an unsettling calm washing over her. I think they want us to find them. What? I gasped, my heart racing. What are you talking about? But before she could answer, a figure stepped from the shadows, its face obscured but its presence suffocating. I felt a pull, a magnetic force drawing me toward it, and I fought against it, trying to hold on to Emily. No, we have to stick together, I shouted, panic rising in my throat, but as I looked into her eyes, I realized she was staring past me, entranced. Jake, it's beautiful, she whispered, and I could see the fear slipping away from her. Emily, no. I screamed, but the forest was closing in, the laughter morphing into whispers that filled my mind, drowning out my thoughts. The darkness promised something I couldn't understand, a terrible allure that threatened to consume us both. As I grappled with the fear surging through me, I realized that the hunt was not just for our lives, but for our very identities. And as I felt the shadows closing in, I knew that whatever lay ahead would test not just our survival, but the essence of who we truly were. The air felt thick with dread as the strange figures drew closer, their silhouettes shifting under the pale moonlight. I clutched Emily's arm tightly, her pulse racing beneath my fingers. Tyler stood apart, a smile plastered on his face that sent chills down my spine. It was as if he was no longer the friend I knew, but a mere shell, inhabited by something sinister. Jake, Emily, a voice hissed, echoing from the shadows. The figures surrounding us whispered among themselves, their murmurs like rustling leaves, unintelligible yet filled with malice. I could see their eyes glinting in the darkness, a grotesque mimicry of human expression. Tyler, what's going on? I shouted, desperation creeping into my voice. You need to tell us what happened. He turned his head slowly, his gaze drifting past me, as if I were nothing more than a passing breeze. You don't understand, Jake. They've chosen me, he said, his voice eerily calm. You should be honored. They don't just choose anyone. Chosen for what? Emily interjected, her voice trembling. This isn't a game, Tyler. We need to get out of here. Out? He echoed, tilting his head in a way that felt unnaturally wrong. There is no out. This is home now. The figures began to close in, their whispers morphing into a chant. Join us, they sang, their voices harmonizing in a haunting melody that wrapped around my mind. I could feel the shadows pressing against my skin, heavy and suffocating, as I struggled to keep my composure. Stay back, I yelled, stepping protectively in front of Emily. What do you want with us? One of the figures, a tall creature with elongated limbs and a face twisted in a grotesque grin, stepped forward. We seek what lies beneath the surface, O brave Jake. The forest has shown us your true self. What are you talking about? I felt a wave of unease wash over me. I glanced at Emily, whose face was pale, fear etched in every feature. Jake, we need to run, she pleaded, but her words felt like they were lost in the oppressive atmosphere. The figure leaned closer, its breath cold against my skin. You are the target, Jake, not Tyler. He has already been claimed. But you, it paused, its hollow eyes boring into mine. You have the potential to become something greater, something more. A shudder coursed through me. No, I won't be a part of this, I shouted, my voice cracking under the weight of my fear. Your fear is what binds you, the figure continued, its voice now a whisper that chilled me to the bone. Face it, and you may yet escape, or succumb, like your friend. I turned to Tyler, who now stood among the figures, a vacant look in his eyes. Tyler, please, fight this, I begged, but he merely smiled wider, as if he was in on a secret I couldn't comprehend. Jake, you know what you must do. The words came from another figure, its face obscured by shadows. Confront the truth. The forest will reveal your hidden self. My heart raced as the ground beneath me seemed to pulse with energy. Suddenly, the world around me shifted, and I found myself face to face with an alternate version of myself. a mirror image, but with dark, swirling shadows in place of my usual features. "Welcome, Jake," it said, its voice a haunting echo of my own. "You've come to realize the darkness within you." "No, this isn't real," I protested, stepping back in disbelief. "You're not me." "Oh, but I am," it replied with a smirk. "I am the part of you that you fear to acknowledge, the darkness that you hide from the world. Embrace it, and you can become more than you ever imagined." "Shut up," I screamed, my voice breaking. "I won't let you take me." The figures surrounding me grew restless, their whispers escalating into a cacophony of distorted laughter. I could feel the weight of their gazes, the pressure of their expectations crushing down on me. "Choose, Jake," my doppelganger taunted. "Face your true self, or remain the coward you've always been." In that moment, I realized that this was the true horror of the forest. Not the creatures lurking in the shadows, but the battle within myself. I took a deep breath, gathering every ounce of courage. "I am not afraid," I declared, my voice strong and clear. "I wouldn't let this darkness consume me. I wouldn't let it take Tyler, or Emily, or myself." "Then prove it," the figure sneered, a flicker of surprise crossing its face. With newfound determination, I stepped forward, ready to confront the darkness and reclaim my identity from the grasp of the sinister forces around me. Story 2. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon as I drove along the winding road leading to Evergreen Lake. The trees, tall and imposing, framed the path like ancient sentinels guarding a hidden world. My heart raced with anticipation at the thought of escaping the chaotic life I had left behind in the city. The incessant noise, the rush of people, the blaring horns, all of it faded with every mile I traveled. I rolled down the window, letting the cool evening air wash over me. It smelled of pine and earth, a refreshing change from the sterile scent of asphalt and exhaust. As I pulled into the campground, the last rays of sunlight danced upon the surface of the lake, creating a mesmerizing play of colors. I parked my car, my eyes drawn to the serene beauty that surrounded me. After gathering my gear, I made my way to a secluded spot near the water's edge. Setting up my tent felt almost ritualistic. Each peg I drove into the ground was a nail in the coffin of my urban life. I could already feel the weight lifting from my shoulders. Once my tent was up, I settled down by the campfire, the flickering flames casting playful shadows around me. The quiet was profound, a stark contrast to the bustling streets I was used to. I pulled out a small journal from my backpack, flipping through pages filled with sketches and notes from my childhood camping trips. My fingers brushed over a drawing of a forest spirit, a creation of my youthful imagination. I chuckled softly, remembering the stories my grandfather used to tell me, tales of lost souls wandering the woods, of whispers that danced on the wind. "Can you believe that stuff?" I said aloud, breaking the silence. "A forest spirit, really? Just a story to scare kids." I leaned back, gazing up at the stars beginning to twinkle against the darkening sky. The vastness of the universe above made me feel small, yet strangely at peace. The crackling fire warmed my skin, but as the night deepened, a chill crept through the air. I wrapped my arms around my knees, trying to ward off the sudden shiver that coursed through me. Just then, I heard it, a faint whisper, almost indistinguishable, as if the wind was carrying words from a forgotten time. I strained to listen, but all I caught was my name, floating in the air like a half-remembered dream. "Jake!" The voice was soft yet insistent, like a distant echo that sent a prickle down my spine. I shook my head, dismissing it as my imagination playing tricks on me. "Get a grip, Jake," I muttered to myself, tossing another log onto the fire. As the flames danced higher, I felt a strange compulsion to look toward the lake. The surface was still, reflecting the moonlight like a polished mirror. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The woods felt alive, breathing around me, and the whispers grew louder, weaving a tapestry of sound that enveloped my senses. "Is anyone out there?" I called, my voice trembling slightly. The only response was the crackling of the fire and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. I stood up, feeling the urge to explore, to delve deeper into the mysteries that surrounded me. Maybe it was the stories from my childhood, or perhaps the allure of the unknown, but something within me stirred. I returned to my tent, my heart pounding with a mix of excitement and trepidation. As I crawled into my sleeping bag, I told myself I was being foolish. This was just a camping trip. I closed my eyes, hoping to drift off into a peaceful slumber, but the whispers continued, wrapping around me like a cold blanket, sending a chill through my bones. "Jake." The word echoed in my mind as I finally succumbed to sleep, unaware of the darkness that lurked just beyond the flickering light of my campfire, waiting to reveal itself in ways I could never have imagined. I jolted awake, my heart pounding in my chest as an otherworldly light bathed my tent in an eerie glow. The shadows danced wildly, flickering against the fabric walls like ghostly figures beckoning me from the outside. I rubbed my eyes, convinced it was just a trick of the firelight, but the brightness persisted, pulling me toward the mouth of the forest and the lake beyond. Tentatively, I unzipped the entrance and stepped outside, the cool night air wrapping around me like a shroud. The moon hung low, illuminating the scene with an ethereal glow. My breath caught in my throat as I turned toward the lake. There it was, a luminous radiance shimmering on the water's surface, casting a surreal glow that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. "Is someone there?" I called, my voice trembling slightly, swallowed by the vastness of the night. The only response was the rustling of leaves and the distant croak of a frog. I took a cautious step forward, the soft earth squishing beneath my feet, and as I approached the water's edge, the light intensified, revealing a figure standing just beyond the shoreline. My heart skipped a beat. A skeletal figure, cloaked in tattered rags, gazed at me with glowing eyes that pierced through the darkness. The sight was horrifying, a twisted embodiment of nightmares. I staggered backward, my instinct screaming at me to flee. "What are you?" I whispered, my voice barely audible, as fear gripped me like a vice. The figure remained motionless, its hollow eyes locked onto mine, and I felt an inexplicable pull, as if it yearned to share a message that transcended the boundaries of the living. I squinted, trying to discern its features, but it was as if the darkness itself had taken shape, a harbinger of something ancient and unspeakable. "Jake," a voice whispered, echoing from the depths of the forest, yet it seemed to emanate from the figure as well. It was a voice I didn't recognize, yet it felt achingly familiar, like a long-lost memory surfacing from the murky depths of my mind. "You've come to seek, to uncover." "No, I'm just camping," I stammered, incredulous at my own response. "I'm not looking for anything." Every instinct told me to run, to escape this waking nightmare, but my feet felt rooted to the ground, as if the forest itself was holding me captive. "Power lies in the depths," the figure continued, its voice a haunting melody, weaving through the trees around me. "But it demands a price." With that, the light flickered, and for a moment, I felt the weight of countless souls pressing against my chest, lost, yearning. I tore my gaze away, panic surging through me. "I don't want any power. I just want to go home," I shouted, the desperation clawing at my throat. The figure tilted its head, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a glimmer of understanding. But then, reality crashed back in. I turned and bolted back to my tent, heart racing, each rapid footfall echoing the pounding in my ears. The forest around me felt alive, the trees whispering secrets that I couldn't comprehend. My mind raced. Was this the manifestation of the legends I dismissed? Was I truly entangled in something far beyond my understanding? I dove into the safety of my tent and zipped it shut, my breath coming in sharp gasps as I pressed my back against the fabric, trying to gather my thoughts. The light from the lake seeped through the cracks, casting ghostly patterns on the inside of my tent. I was safe, I told myself. I was just overreacting. But the whispering wouldn't stop. It filled the air, curling around me like smoke, beckoning me to listen. I squeezed my eyes shut, wishing for the dawn, for the sun to rise and banish the darkness that had seeped into my very soul. As I lay there, shivering under my sleeping bag, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had crossed a threshold I could never return from. The forest had stirred, and I was now a part of its haunting tale. A tale woven with shadows, secrets, and something far more sinister than I could ever imagine. As the morning sun cast its golden rays through the canopy of trees, I woke with a start, drenched in sweat and confusion. The memory of the skeletal figure still haunted me, its glowing eyes piercing through the fog of my dreams like an unwelcome guest. I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the remnants of the night. It was just a figment of my imagination, I muttered to myself, but even I could hear the tremor in my voice, betraying my uncertainty. After a quick breakfast of granola and a couple of granola bars, I decided to explore the area surrounding Evergreen Lake. I needed to distract myself from the unease that lingered like a dark cloud above my head. Pulling on my boots, I stepped outside the confines of my tent, the crisp air filling my lungs, invigorating yet oddly foreboding. Just a little walk, I said aloud, hoping to convince myself as much as anyone else. I meandered down a narrow path, flanked by towering pines, and the sweet scent of earth mingled with dew. The forest was alive, yet it felt strangely silent, as though it were holding its breath. As I walked, I noticed a slight rustling in the underbrush, and I paused, heart racing. "Hello? Is anyone there?" I called out, the words echoing oddly in the stillness. No response came, only the soft whisper of the wind. Eventually, I stumbled upon an abandoned campsite, the remnants of what once was a fire pit, a couple of old tents long since collapsed, and nature reclaiming the space. My curiosity piqued. I rummaged through the debris, pushing aside fallen branches and leaves. That's when I spotted it, a weathered diary half buried beneath a layer of dirt and grime. With trembling hands, I pulled it free, brushing off the dust to reveal its tattered cover. My heart raced as I opened it, the pages yellowed with age and filled with cramped handwriting. The first entry was dated decades ago, recounting a camping trip similar to mine. "I can't shake the feeling that the forest is alive," the camper had written. "The trees seem to watch, and at night, whispers drift through the air, calling to me. I must explore further." My skin prickled, and I couldn't help but feel a chill run down my spine. I flipped through the pages, each entry growing darker, more frantic, as if the camper had become increasingly entangled with whatever presence lurked in the woods. "Rituals," I read aloud, the word heavy on my tongue. "We gathered at the lake to summon powers beyond our comprehension. The entity grants favors, but at a cost." My voice faltered, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I had dismissed the local legends as mere folklore, but now the truth felt suffocatingly close. "Jake?" A soft voice broke through my thoughts, pulling me from the diary's ominous grip. I looked up, startled, to see a young woman standing at the edge of the campsite, her expression a mix of concern and curiosity. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Yeah, I'm fine," I stammered, quickly closing the diary and tucking it under my arm. I recognized her from the campground, a fellow camper, though I hadn't caught her name. "I just found this old diary. It's strange." "What does it say?" she asked, stepping closer, her eyes glinting with intrigue. "It talks about rituals and some kind of entity that grants power," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know. It's all a bit unsettling." She frowned, crossing her arms. "You shouldn't mess with things you don't understand. The forest has a way of revealing truths that are better left buried." Her tone was serious, and I felt a cold shiver race down my spine, echoing the warnings I'd read. "I thought it was just a bunch of stories," I admitted, my voice shaking slightly. "But now you're not so sure," she finished for me, her gaze piercing into mine. "You should be careful, Jake. The forest remembers what we try to forget." I swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling like a stone in my stomach. "Maybe I should just head back," I suggested, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't think I'm ready for whatever this is." "Good idea," she said softly, backing away slowly. "Just remember, some echoes are better left unheard." As she faded into the trees, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. I clutched the diary tightly, the secrets within it pressing down on me like the very weight of the forest itself. I turned to head back to my campsite, the whispers of the trees seeming to beckon me, urging me to uncover more, to delve deeper into the shadows. But something told me that the more I uncovered, the more I might lose. As I wandered deeper into the forest, the tall trees loomed overhead like ancient sentinels. The air grew thicker, filled with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was being watched. Each rustle of the underbrush sent a shiver down my spine, and I could swear that the whispers had returned, faint but persistent, calling my name in a haunting melody. "Jake, Jake," they echoed, intertwining with the wind. I paused, glancing around, half expecting to see someone lurking behind a tree. "Get a grip, Jake," I muttered to myself, trying to shake off the tightening grip of fear. But as I took another step forward, something caught my eye. A series of footprints in the mud, large and oddly shaped. They were unlike any animal tracks I had ever seen. They were far too big and had an unnatural depth, as if something enormous had passed this way. My heart raced as I crouched down to examine them. "What the hell?" I whispered, tracing the outline of one of the prints with my finger. The edges were too sharp and defined, suggesting a presence that defied the natural order of the forest. I glanced around nervously, that creeping sensation of being watched returning tenfold. The whispers seemed to grow louder, more insistent, wrapping around me like a cold wind. "Jake, follow us." Okay, just stay calm," I said aloud, trying to reassure myself. I stood up and took a deep breath, attempting to gather my thoughts. Should I follow these tracks? My instincts screamed at me to turn back, to return to the safety of my campsite. Yet something else urged me forward. A morbid curiosity intertwined with the fear that gripped my heart. I took a step in the direction of the footprints, my pulse pounding in my ears. Each step felt like a betrayal of my better judgment, but I pressed on, drawn into the depths of the forest by an invisible thread. The trees closed in around me, and the sunlight began to fade, swallowed by the thick canopy above. The air grew heavier, filled with an oppressive silence that made the whispers feel like a distant memory. Then, just as I was about to turn back, I heard it. A voice, soft yet commanding, cutting through the silence. "Jake!" It was unmistakable, as if the forest itself had spoken my name. I froze, my breath hitching. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice betraying a tremor that I couldn't conceal. "Come, find us," the voice beckoned, echoing from somewhere deeper in the woods. "Find who?" I shouted, my nerves fraying. "What do you want from me?" "Everything," it whispered, the sound wrapping around me like a shroud. I felt a chill wash over me, and for a moment, my mind raced with thoughts of those who had vanished in these woods. The diary's entries flashed in my mind. The dark rituals, the lost souls. Had I walked into a trap, or was I the one meant to uncover the truth? I turned back toward the lake, an instinctual urge to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the forest. "I need to go back," I murmured to myself, but my feet seemed to have other ideas, dragging me deeper into the unknown. As I walked, the footprints led me in a winding path, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being guided by something unseen. With every step, the whispers intensified, becoming a symphony of voices layered upon one another. Jake, Jake. Suddenly, I stumbled upon a clearing, the trees parting to reveal an ancient stone altar at its center. My breath hitched in my throat as I approached it cautiously. The stones were worn and covered in moss, but the air felt charged with an energy I couldn't explain. A shiver ran down my spine as I realized this place was no ordinary clearing. It was a site of rituals, of power. Why am I here? I whispered, breathless, feeling the weight of the forest's history pressing down on me. The whispers seemed to converge, swirling around me like a tempest, whispering secrets of the past. I was caught between fear and a strange exhilaration, the allure of uncovering the forest's dark truths pulling me closer to the altar. I stood there, grappling with the decision that lay before me. I could turn back, ignore the call of the unknown, or step forward into the heart of the mystery. Gathering all my courage, I took a deep breath and prepared to confront whatever awaited me. But as I moved closer to the altar, a cold gust of wind swept through the clearing, and I froze, sensing that the forest was alive and watching, waiting for my next move. As I approached the lake, heart racing and breath catching in my throat, the skeletal figure loomed closer than before. The pale moonlight painted it in an otherworldly glow, and I felt its unsettling aura wrap around me like a thick fog. My legs felt heavy, as if the very earth was urging me to turn back, but something deeper, an inexplicable pull, urged me forward. "Who are you?" I whispered into the chilling night air, my voice quaking as I spoke. The figure remained silent, yet I felt its gaze piercing into my very soul. A shiver ran down my spine, and I recalled the legend I had overheard at the diner. Tales of lost souls haunting the forest, caught between this world and the next. I had dismissed them as mere campfire stories, but now, standing before this ghastly apparition, I was beginning to understand the gravity of the legends. Jake, a voice, faint and haunting, echoed through the stillness of the night. It was as if the forest itself spoke my name, wrapping it in sorrowful wind. I froze, the hairs on my arms standing on end. "You must listen." "Listen to what?" I demanded, my fear morphing into a desperate need for answers. "What do you want from me?" The figure seemed to sway, its bony fingers reaching out toward me, beckoning. "You are chosen, Jake. You have the power to understand, to change." A rush of confusion flooded my mind. Change? What change? My life in the city felt distant now, a mere memory of noise and chaos, replaced by this haunting vision that demanded my attention. Chosen for what? I breathed, my voice barely above a whisper. "What do you mean?" The figure's glowing eyes softened momentarily, and for a fleeting second, I could have sworn I saw a flicker of humanity in its depths. "To end the cycle," it murmured, a sorrowful tone lacing its words. "The forest suffers from greed, from the hunger of those who sought power over life. You must understand their pain to free us." I felt a surge of anguish ripple through me, as if the weight of the forest's lost souls pressed down on my chest. "I don't understand." Panic clawed at my throat. "How can I help you? I'm just a guy camping in the woods." "Not just a guy," it intoned, its voice echoing in my mind. "You have the spirit of those who came before you. They whisper through you, guiding you." Suddenly, the figure began to dissolve, its form melting into the surface of the water, a shimmering haze that danced like ripples across the lake. "Wait," I shouted, desperation flooding my voice. "Don't go. I need to know more." But it was too late. The figure vanished into the depths, leaving only the moonlight reflecting eerily on the water's surface, a mirror of my confusion. I stood there, the night closing in around me, a suffocating silence enveloping the air. What had just happened? Had I truly connected with this lost soul, or was it merely a figment of my imagination fueled by fear? My heart raced as I took a step back, the realization settling in like a heavy fog. I was caught in a web of something far larger than myself, and the forest was alive with echoes of its tragic past. Each whisper of the wind felt like a plea, a cry for release. I needed to understand, to dive deeper into the history that haunted these woods. As I turned to leave the water's edge, a sudden gust of wind whipped through the trees, sending a chill down my spine. "Jake!" The voices rose again, more insistent, swirling around me like a tempest. "You must uncover the truth." I stumbled backwards, heart racing, as I felt the weight of the forest's sorrow press against me. I couldn't ignore it any longer. There was a connection here that I needed to explore, a dark legacy that demanded to be unveiled. Whatever it was that resided within these woods, it was intertwined with my very being, and I felt an unshakable resolve building within me. I would find the answers, even if it meant confronting my deepest fears in the process. And the forest felt alive around me, its whispers swirling with urgency. I could barely hear my own thoughts over the cacophony of voices urging me to flee. But something deep within me resisted the instinct to run. It was as if the very ground beneath my feet was calling me forward. I took a deep breath, steeling myself against the chill that danced along my spine, and stepped deeper into the woods. As I pushed through the underbrush, I stumbled upon an altar, half hidden by vines and crumbling stones. The air thickened with an oppressive energy that made my skin prickle. Charred remnants of what appeared to be offerings lay scattered around. Bones, twisted branches, and faded trinkets, all marred by time and neglect. The sight sent a shiver down my spine, but I felt an inexplicable pull toward the altar, as if it was waiting for me. "Jake!" a voice whispered, soft and mournful, drifting through the trees like a ghostly breeze. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. My heart raced, every instinct screaming for me to turn back. But I couldn't. Not now. I had to understand what was happening. "Help us!" the voice pleaded, echoing through the forest. "They've trapped us here." I knelt before the altar, the remnants of a dark past staring back at me. It was then that I noticed strange markings etched into the stone, symbols that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. I reached out, tracing my fingers over the cold surface, and felt a jolt of energy surge through me. "Jake!" The voice called again, louder this time, and I recognized it. An echo from my childhood. "You must purify this place. Free us." "Purify?" I echoed, confusion swirling in my mind. I remembered the diary, the dark rituals described within its pages, and the power it promised. But at what cost? "What do you mean?" "Choose." The voice was insistent now, the forest around me vibrating with urgency. Power or freedom? Suddenly, I felt a presence behind me, a chilling energy that froze me in place. I turned slowly, and there it was, the skeletal figure, more defined now, its glowing eyes piercing through the shadows. It floated just above the ground, exuding an aura that beckoned me closer. "Join me, Jake," it rasped, its voice like the rustling of dead leaves. "Together, we can harness the power of the forest. You can be more than you are." My heart raced, the temptation swirling within me. The power it promised was intoxicating, a chance to escape my mundane life, to become something greater. But as I looked into those glowing eyes, I saw the pain of countless souls trapped within, lost to their own greed and ambition. "No," I breathed, shaking my head as the truth began to crystallize in my mind. "I won't do it. I won't become part of this." The figure recoiled, its form flickering like a dying flame. "You fool. You could have been free." "I am free," I countered, my voice stronger now. "You don't have to be trapped here either. We can break this cycle." The whispers around me grew louder, a chorus of lost souls echoing my resolve. I focused on the altar, the symbols glowing beneath my touch. I remembered the purification ritual I had read about, a way to cleanse the darkness that lingered in this place. "Let me help you," I said firmly, channeling all my will into the words, "I will not let you suffer any longer." As I began to chant the words I'd memorized, the air crackled with energy. The skeletal figure writhed, its form shifting as the power I summoned clashed with the darkness that had held it captive for so long. The forest trembled, branches creaking and leaves rustling violently. "Jake!" the voice cried, mingling with others, all pleading for release. "Do it!" With every syllable, I felt the weight of their anguish lifting, a tide of energy washing over me. The glowing eyes of the figure softened, revealing a glimmer of humanity beneath the skeletal facade. "Thank you," it whispered as the darkness began to dissolve. "Thank you for freeing us." The air shimmered, and in a blinding flash, the figure dissipated into a cascade of light, melding with the forest. I felt the presence of the lost soul surrounding me, a warmth enveloping my entire being. The whispers transformed from cries of despair into songs of gratitude, echoing through the trees. And in that moment, I understood. I had awakened a force greater than I could have ever imagined, a force that liberated not only the trapped souls but also myself from the shackles of fear and doubt. The forest was no longer a place of darkness. It was a sanctuary, alive with the echoes of freedom. Story 3. As I sat on my bed, surrounded by scattered gear and crumpled snack wrappers, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease creeping up my spine. My younger brother, Noah, was in a frenzy of excitement, his voice bubbling over as he packed his own backpack. "Ethan, you have to hear about the guardian spirit. They say it protects the forest from all evil. Can you believe that?" His enthusiasm was infectious, yet I felt a weight in my chest that made me hesitate. "Yeah, I heard," I replied, trying to sound more interested than I felt. "But what if it's just a story? You know how legends can be." I zipped up my backpack, the sound echoing my own uncertainties. My flashlight, an old but trusty companion, was the last item I added. Noah rolled his eyes, his dark hair bouncing as he did. "Come on. You can't possibly think it's just a story. What if it's real? What if we actually see it?" He paused, his eyes sparkling with mischief. "Imagine telling everyone we found the guardian spirit. They'd be so jealous. Or maybe we'd just get lost in the woods," I countered, trying to inject some caution into his excitement. "It's getting late, and we should be careful." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the room grew dim, shadows stretching along the walls. I felt a chill, and for a moment, I wondered if we were making a mistake. "Let's just stick to the trails, all right?" I suggested, glancing out the window to the darkening sky. "Where's the fun in that?" Noah shot back, his grin wide. "We'll go without lanterns. It'll be like an adventure. We can feel the forest's essence. Please, Ethan." He clasped his hands together, imploring me with wide eyes. "Fine, but if we get lost, it's on you," I relented, my voice laced with a mix of trepidation and acceptance. We finished packing, and soon enough, we were outside, the cool evening air wrapping around us like a cloak. As we approached the edge of the forest, I caught sight of a gnarled tree, its bark twisted into grotesque shapes. Faces seemed to emerge from the wood, their expressions caught in eternal screams. I stopped, a shiver racing down my spine. "Noah, look at that tree. Doesn't it freak you out?" He shrugged, stepping closer to examine it. "It's just a tree, Ethan. You're letting your imagination run wild. It's probably just the shadows playing tricks." He laughed, but there was an edge of nervousness in his tone that I noted. "Yeah, maybe," I muttered, trying to shake off the feeling that something was off. "But still, let's keep moving." We stepped into the forest, the light of the setting sun fading rapidly, leaving only a thin sliver of twilight. The trees loomed taller, their branches intertwining like skeletal fingers reaching for the sky. As we ventured deeper, an unsettling silence enveloped us, broken only by the crunch of leaves beneath our feet. "Do you think the guardian spirit is watching us?" Noah asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Maybe, I replied, though I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. But if it is, I hope it's friendly. A soft rustling sound made me stop in my tracks. For a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a figure flit between the trees, but when I turned to look, there was nothing. Did you hear that? I asked, my voice trembling. What? Noah turned, his brow furrowed. You're being paranoid. It's just the wind. Yeah, right, I mumbled under my breath. Yet, as we continued on, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I glanced back at the gnarled tree one last time, its faces seeming to follow us as we moved deeper into the woods. With each step we took, the air grew heavier, and an unshakable sense of dread settled over me. I wanted to turn back, but Noah's excitement pushed us forward, deeper into the shadows of the night, unaware of the darkness that lay ahead. The deeper we ventured into the forest, the more the laughter that once accompanied us faded into an unsettling silence. Each step on the damp leaves beneath our feet felt heavier, as if the very earth was trying to pull us back. I glanced sideways at Noah, who was attempting to fill the void with his usual exuberance, but his voice trembled slightly, revealing the tension beneath his excitement. Ethan, can you believe it? We're actually in the haunted forest. This is where the guardian spirit roams, he exclaimed, his eyes wide with a mix of thrill and fear. Yeah, it's great, Noah, I replied, forcing a smile. Just, let's be careful, okay? As we walked further, the pressure of the silence grew oppressive. Noah tried to lighten the mood again. What if we see the spirit? What do you think it'll look like? I shrugged, my stomach nodding at the thought. I don't know. Hopefully friendly? Noah laughed, but it echoed awkwardly in the stillness, swallowed by the trees. Come on, it'll be like an adventure, just like in the movies. But this wasn't a movie. It felt all too real, and the shadows around us seemed to shift with an almost sentient quality. I could feel a prickling at the back of my neck, and I instinctively quickened my pace. I wanted to reassure myself that I was in control, that we were safe. But as the minutes passed, the whispers began. At first, they were mere murmurs, unintelligible, weaving in and out of the wind. Did you hear that? Noah asked, his excitement dimming into concern. Yeah, I admitted, my heart racing. It sounded like voices. He paused, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. Voices? Like our parents? A chill ran down my spine. I don't know. They sounded distorted. We exchanged a glance, and I could see the fear creeping into his expression. What if they're trying to tell us something? He whispered. Or warn us, I replied, my throat suddenly dry. We both fell silent, the whispers growing louder, swirling around us like a dark fog. The laughter was gone, replaced by a chorus of indistinct murmurs that twisted the air with an unnerving chill. Ethan, we should, Noah started, but before he could finish, the whispers sharpened, forming words that sent a jolt through my body. They were unmistakably familiar. Ethan, Noah. I froze, my blood running cold. Did you hear that? I breathed, unable to mask the tremor in my voice. Why, yeah, Noah stammered, his face paling. It sounded just like Mom and Dad. Why are they here? Panic clawed at my insides. I wanted to run, to escape this nightmare, but my feet felt glued to the ground. Noah's eyes darted around us, searching for the source of the voices. Maybe we should go back, he suggested, his voice barely a whisper, tinged with dread. Nodding in agreement, we quickened our pace, but the whispers only intensified, echoing our thoughts, twisting our fears into a cacophony of despair. Stay with us, they beckoned, and I felt my heartbeat quicken, a primal instinct telling me to flee. Ethan, what's happening? Noah shouted, his voice breaking as he stumbled slightly, grasping my arm tightly. I don't want to be here anymore. Neither do I replied, urgency clawing at my throat. Just keep moving. The atmosphere thickened. a palpable weight pressing down as if the trees themselves were closing in around us, suffocating and dark. I could feel something watching us, lurking just beyond the periphery of our vision. "Noah, don't look back," I urged, my breath coming in quick gasps as we pushed forward, the echoes of our parents' distorted voices following us like a haunting melody. "Ethan, what if we're not supposed to leave?" he gasped, panic lacing his words. The shadows around us seemed to shift, writhing in the corners of my vision. "We have to," I shouted, adrenaline coursing through my veins. "We can't listen to them." But as we ran, I felt the whispers clawing at my sanity, intertwining with memories I had tried to bury. The forest felt alive, a maze of darkness that held secrets we weren't meant to uncover. As we ventured deeper into the forest, a creeping sense of dread gnawed at my insides. The laughter that once filled the air had faded, replaced by an unsettling silence that pressed against my ears like a heavy fog. I stole a glance at Noah, who walked a few steps ahead, his enthusiasm dimming under the weight of the shadows that enveloped us. "Ethan, do you think the guardian spirit is watching us?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I could tell he was trying to inject some levity into the situation, but it fell flat against the growing tension. I don't know, Noah," I replied, my heart racing. Maybe it's just a story after all. But as I said it, I felt a chill crawl down my spine. My mind drifted back to our grandmother's tales. She used to sit by the fireplace, her voice low and conspiratorial, weaving stories of a dark entity that thrived on fear and loneliness. I could almost hear her words echoing in my head, as if she were warning us from beyond the grave. "Do you remember Grandma's stories?" I asked suddenly, needing to break the oppressive silence that suffocated us. Noah turned, his brow furrowing. "You mean the one about the shadow? You think that could be real?" "Maybe," I said hesitantly. "She always said that the shadow is drawn to those who feel alone or scared." Noah's eyes widened slightly, and I could see the gears turning in his mind. "So, you think it's hunting us? Let's just focus on getting back," I suggested, feeling the urgency in my voice. "We shouldn't linger here any longer." As if in response to my words, the air around us thickened, and the whispers returned, distorted and echoing, a cruel mimicry of our parents' voices calling out to us. I felt my stomach drop. "Did you hear that?" Noah's voice trembled, and I could see the fear etched across his face. "Yeah," I nodded, my pulse quickening. "We need to go. Now." We turned to retrace our steps, but each hurried footfall seemed to draw the voices closer, warping into a chilling chorus that beckoned us deeper into the woods. Panic surged through me, and I could feel Noah's presence beside me, his breath quickening as we pushed ourselves to run faster. "Ethan, I can't handle this," he gasped, glancing back as if expecting something to leap out from the shadows. "Just keep moving," I urged, my survival instincts kicking in. The shadow we had felt before now flitted between the trees, a dark mass that seemed to pulse and breathe with an unnerving life of its own. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, drowning out the whispers that morphed into frantic screams, drowning out any rational thought. "It's just a trick. It can't hurt us," I shouted, trying to convince myself as much as I was trying to comfort Noah. But with each step, the shadows thickened, and the air turned frigid, wrapping around us like a vice. I glanced at Noah, watching as he stumbled slightly, fear etched on his face. "We can't stop. We can't let it catch us." "Where do we go?" he shouted, his voice cracking. "Just keep running," I called back, the words tumbling out of my mouth without thought. I had no idea where we were heading, but I felt an instinctual drive to escape whatever darkness was chasing us. As we sprinted forward, I felt a cold shadow flicker just out of my line of sight. It was as if the very essence of fear had taken form, darting through the trees, taunting us with its presence. My instinct screamed at me to flee faster, to break free from this nightmare that felt all too real. "Ethan, I can't." Noah's voice faded into a breathless whisper. "Don't look back. Just run," I shouted, pushing him forward as adrenaline coursed through my veins. The forest twisted around us, branches clawing at our clothes and skin, but we couldn't stop. We wouldn't stop. Each echo of our parents' voices grew louder, warping into a cacophony of despair that wrapped around us like a suffocating shroud. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that the shadows were more than just figments of our imagination. They were alive, hungry, and they wanted us to feel their terror. And as we ran, I realized that this forest held more than just legends. There were truths buried deep within its haunted heart, truths we were not yet ready to confront. As we fled deeper into the forest, my heart pounded in my chest like a drum, the thrill of fear coursing through me. I could feel the weight of the shadows pressing down, thickening the air around us as we ran. It was then that a fleeting thought struck me like a bolt of lightning. The amulet. My grandmother had entrusted it to me for a reason, and I had almost forgotten it in the chaos. "Ethan, we can't stop," Noah shouted, his voice shaking, barely audible over the cacophony of whispers that seemed to rise from the very ground beneath our feet. "I need to get the amulet," I yelled back, my voice barely breaking through the frantic screams echoing in my mind. I skidded to a halt, heart racing, and fumbled through my backpack while Noah hesitated, glancing nervously over his shoulder. The moment my fingers brushed against the cool metal, a wave of calm washed over me, even amid the chaos. I pulled it out, its silver surface glinting in the scant moonlight that filtered through the trees. Just holding it felt like having a spark of hope in the depths of despair. "Ethan, hurry," Noah urged, his eyes wide with terror. The whispers morphed into frantic screams that clawed at our sanity, wrapping around us like vines. As I clutched the amulet tightly, I noticed the shadow flicker at the edge of my vision. It hesitated, as if the amulet had an effect on it. "Noah, look," I cried, pointing toward the shadow that loomed in the distance. "What is happening?" he whispered, his voice trembling as he watched the entity waver, almost like it was testing the air around it. "Maybe it's afraid of this," I said, feeling a surge of courage pulse through me. "This is our chance." Noah's eyes darted nervously between the dark shapes around us and the amulet in my hand. "But what if it gets angry? We need to go." His instinct to run was palpable, but I could feel the amulet's energy resonating with something deep within me, a connection to our past. I stepped forward, the amulet held high. "We can't just keep running. We have to face this. We can't let it control us," I shouted, my voice echoing in the oppressive silence that followed, the screams subsiding into a chilling whisper. As I advanced, the shadow seemed to vibrate with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. "Ethan, please," Noah pleaded, hesitating at my side. "You don't know what it wants. We can't trust it. I think it's feeding off our fear, Noah. If we confront it, maybe we can break this cycle," I replied, my voice tinged with determination. I could feel the amulet's energy flowing through me, a protective shield against the darkness that threatened to engulf us. Suddenly, the whispers shifted, becoming more frantic, more desperate. It was as if the forest itself was alive, resonating with our fears. "Mom," I heard a voice that was unmistakably our mother's, distorted and twisted. "No," Noah shouted, clamping his hands over his ears. "This can't be happening." But I couldn't look away. I felt drawn to the shadows, to the echoes of our past that lingered in the air like a haunting melody. "Noah, listen to me. We have to face this together," I urged, my voice barely breaking through the chaos. "You don't understand," he shouted back, his eyes wild with panic. "We shouldn't have come here. This is a mistake." The shadows around us began to pulse, writhing in rhythm with our escalating emotions. The amulet in my hand felt warm, alive, as if it resonated with my resolve. It's not a mistake if we can find out what it wants, I insisted, stepping further into the darkness. Noah hesitated, his expression shifting from fear to something deeper. Guilt, perhaps. What if it wants to punish us? He whispered, his voice trembling. Or maybe it wants us to understand, I countered, my voice steady. To confront our fears, our past. As I took another step, the shadow recoiled slightly, as if sensing the strength of my conviction. I glanced back at Noah, who stood rooted in place, torn between fear and the urge to follow me into the unknown. Please, Noah, we can't let it win. We owe it to Mom, to ourselves. With a deep breath, I raised the amulet higher, feeling its energy resonate through me. The whispers transformed into a cacophony of voices, some familiar, some alien, blending into a symphony of our shared memories and fears. Face us, they cried, intertwining with the shadows that danced around us. Together, I urged, holding out my hand toward Noah, who finally stepped forward, his expression shifting from fear to determination. Together, he echoed, his voice steadying as he took my hand. The moment our fingers touched, the amulet pulsed with light, illuminating the darkness that surrounded us. And in that moment, I knew we were ready to confront whatever lay ahead, whether it be shadows from our past or the demons that haunted our hearts. The fire crackled softly, sending sparks dancing into the night sky, but it did little to dispel the unease that had settled over us like a heavy fog. I sat on a log, holding the amulet tightly in my palm, trying to draw strength from its familiar warmth. Noah was pacing nearby, casting anxious glances towards the darkened trees that loomed just beyond the flickering light. Ethan, do you feel that? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, though I was unsure how to articulate the sensation clawing at my insides. It feels different here, like something's watching us. Noah's eyes narrowed, and he stopped pacing to look at me. I can't shake the feeling. It's like the forest knows we're here. His brow furrowed, and I could see the tension in his shoulders. What if we shouldn't have come here? We're fine, I replied, though my voice lacked conviction. We've made it this far. The amulet will protect us. I held it up, the metal glinting in the firelight. For a moment, the memory of my grandmother's soothing voice filled my mind, recounting tales of the spirit that safeguarded the innocent. But even that comfort was fading, replaced by the oppressive weight of the forest surrounding us. Noah turned his gaze back to the trees, shadows dancing in the periphery of our firelight. It's just stories, right? You said so yourself. There's no guardian spirit, just us. Yeah, but there's also the shadow, I reminded him, recalling the icy feeling that had swept through me when we encountered it earlier. And whatever that thing is, it's more than just a ghost story. The wind rustled through the branches, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. I glanced towards the forest, half expecting to see the shadow creeping closer, but there was nothing, just darkness and the distant hoot of an owl. Should we talk about it? Noah suggested, his voice trembling slightly. Maybe if we say it out loud, it'll lose its power. Okay, I said, taking a deep breath. What do you want to talk about? He hesitated, his eyes darting back to the trees. I don't know. Just everything. The voices, the shadows. It's all too much. Let's start with the voices, I urged. What did you hear? Noah swallowed hard, his hands clenching into fists. It sounded like Mom. I thought I was imagining it, but it felt real, like she was calling for us. My heart pounded in my chest. I heard it too, but it can't be her. I trailed off, the weight of the unspoken truth hanging heavily between us. She's gone, Noah finished for me, his voice barely above a whisper. But what if she's trapped? What if the shadow is keeping her here? The thought struck me like a physical blow, and I felt my breath hitch. Noah, don't say that. It's just a shadow. It's not our mother. But what if it is? His eyes were wide. Fear etched across his face. What if the shadow is feeding off our fear, keeping her close? Stop, I said, my voice sharper than intended. We can't think like that. We need to focus on getting out of here. A gust of wind swept through the campsite, extinguishing the fire for a brief moment, plunging us into darkness. I felt a surge of panic, grabbing for the amulet and holding it tightly against my chest. Noah, I'm here, he said quickly, his hand reaching for mine. Ethan, the fire, it's gone. I could hear the tremor in his voice, and it only heightened my own fear. Light it again. We need the light. He fumbled for the matches, his hands shaking as he struggled to strike one. The darkness pressed in, and I felt a suffocating weight, as if the very trees were closing in on us. At last, Noah managed to ignite a match, the tiny flame flickering to life. With shaky hands, he brought it to the kindling, and the fire roared back to life, casting long shadows around us. See? I said, trying to inject some confidence into my voice. We're okay. But as I looked around, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The shadows seemed to twist and writhe unnaturally, a dark dance that felt all too sentient. Ethan, Noah's voice was a strained whisper. What if it's not okay? I didn't have an answer. All I could do was grip the amulet tighter, hoping with every fiber of my being that it would be enough to protect us from whatever lay beyond the firelight. The nights had become a twisted reflection of our fears, each one darker than the last. I lay awake in the tent, the soft rustle of leaves outside echoing the whispers that had invaded my dreams. The shadow had taken on a more defined shape in my nightmares, a menacing figure that stalked me with an intensity that left me gasping for breath. I could still see its outline, shifting and writhing, as if it were taunting me from the depths of my subconscious. Noah, restless in the adjacent sleeping bag, had become obsessed with the forest legends. Ethan, listen to this, he whispered one night, his voice barely above a breath. It says that many who sought the guardian spirit, they never came back. His eyes were wide, glimmering with a mix of fear and fascination. I felt a chill race down my spine, the weight of his words settling heavily in the pit of my stomach. Maybe we should just go home, I murmured, my voice trembling. This place it's not right. The shadows seemed to creep closer as I spoke, as if the forest itself was listening, waiting for us to make a mistake. No way, Noah replied, his tone firm yet laced with a hint of desperation. We have to find out what's really going on. We can't let this thing win. I wanted to trust him, to believe that unveiling the truth would somehow grant us safety, but the depths of the forest felt alive, pulsing with a darkness that was suffocating. One night, I was jolted awake by the sound of whispers outside our tent. My heart raced as I peered through the thin fabric, straining to see in the dim moonlight. For a moment, I thought I saw a familiar figure silhouetted against the trees, someone who resembled our mother. I blinked, and the shape vanished, leaving only the oppressive silence of the woods. Noah, I whispered, shaking him awake. Did you see that? What? See what? He sat up quickly, his face a mask of concern. Ethan, what's wrong? I thought I saw someone. It looked like Mom. The confession hung in the air, thick and heavy, as we both realized the implications of my words. The shadows around us seemed to pulse with a life of their own, and I could feel their cold fingers wrapping around my throat. That's not possible, Noah said, his voice trembling slightly. She's gone, Ethan. We can't let our minds play tricks on us. But the whispers outside grew louder, morphing into indistinct murmurs that sounded hauntingly familiar. It was as if the darkness itself was calling to us, beckoning us to step out into the unknown. We need to find out what it wants, I said, the fear in my voice mingling with a strange sense of determination. The next day, we decided to delve deeper into the legends. We spent hours in the local library, poring over dusty books and old newspaper articles, searching for any mention of the guardian spirit. It was Noah who found it, a tattered diary belonging to someone who had ventured into the forest long ago. "Ethan, look at this," he said, excitement bubbling beneath his anxious exterior. "There are rituals mentioned here, ways to protect ourselves from the shadow." I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. Maybe if we perform one of these rituals, we can banish it for good. But even as I spoke, a gnawing doubt crept into my mind. What if the shadow was too powerful? What if we were walking straight into a trap? That night, as we gathered the items we would need, the air around us thickened with tension. I clutched the amulet my grandmother had given me, its weight grounding me amidst the rising fear. "Do you really think this will work?" I asked Noah, my voice barely above a whisper. "We have to try," he insisted, his eyes alight with a mix of fear and resolve. "If we don't, we'll never know, and we can't let it win." I nodded, though uncertainty gnawed at my insides. As we made our way back into the forest, the shadows loomed larger than before, twisting and writhing in anticipation. Each step felt like a descent into a nightmare, but we pressed on, determined to confront the darkness that had haunted us for so long. The air was electric, charged with an unseen energy that thrummed beneath our skin. In the clearing, we set the items down, and Noah's hands trembled as he began to recite the words from the diary. I could feel the shadows closing in, their whispers growing louder, drowning out my thoughts. The weight of the moment pressed heavily on my chest, and I wondered if we were truly prepared for what lay ahead. Story 4. The air was crisp and invigorating as Sarah and I stepped into the embrace of the forest, the sunlight filtering through the canopy of leaves above us, creating a tapestry of shadows on the ground. I could feel the thrill of adventure coursing through my veins. This was exactly what we needed, an escape from the mundane. "Can you believe we finally made it here?" I said, glancing at Sarah, who was adjusting her backpack straps with a smile that illuminated her face. "I know. It's beautiful," she replied, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Just us and nature. What could be better?" We walked along the main trail, the soft crunch of leaves beneath our boots almost melodic. I reveled in the moment, sharing little stories about past hikes and spontaneous road trips, my voice rising with enthusiasm. "You remember that time we got lost on that mountain trail? We ended up at that weird diner with the creepy owner?" Sarah laughed, the sound light and carefree. "How could I forget? I thought we were going to end up in a horror movie." As we continued our trek, I noticed a narrow dirt path veering off from the main trail. "Hey, look at that!" I exclaimed, pointing at the path. "Shouldn't we check it out? It looks like an adventure waiting to happen." Sarah's brow furrowed slightly. "I don't know, Jake. It seems a bit off. What if it leads to nowhere?" "Come on, where's your sense of adventure?" I teased, nudging her playfully. "We can handle a little detour. Who knows what we might find?" After a moment's hesitation, she sighed, a reluctant smile forming on her lips. "All right, but if we end up lost, it's on you." With that, we ventured down the overgrown path, branches reaching out like fingers, brushing against us as if trying to hold us back. The air felt different here, thicker, almost heavy with unspoken secrets. I glanced at Sarah, who was looking around nervously, her adventurous spirit wavering. "Just a little further," I encouraged. My curiosity piqued as the trees began to part, revealing something nestled among them. There it stood, a dilapidated cabin, its wooden structure sagging with age and neglect, the roof partially caved in. An unsettling aura surrounded it, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. "Jake, are you sure this is a good idea?" Sarah's voice was a whisper, laced with uncertainty. "Just think of it as a piece of history," I replied, stepping closer, the curiosity gnawing at me. "What do you say we take a look inside?" She hesitated for a moment longer, her eyes darting to the shadows that seemed to dance around the cabin. "I don't know. It feels creepy. Creepy or not, it's part of the adventure," I countered, pushing the rickety door open with a loud creak. Dust swirled around us, illuminated by slivers of light seeping through the cracked windows. The air inside was stale, filled with a pungent odor that made my stomach churn, but my curiosity outweighed the discomfort. "Jake, maybe we should just go," Sarah urged, her voice trembling slightly. "Just a quick look around, I promise," I said, my heart racing as I stepped inside. The floorboards groaned under my weight, and I could feel the chill of the air wrapping around me. "Come on, it'll be fun." With a deep breath, Sarah followed, her eyes scanning the room, taking in the eerie atmosphere. The walls were lined with what looked like faded photographs, their subjects staring back at us with eyes that seemed to follow our every move. "This place feels wrong," she muttered, her unease palpable. "Maybe it's just old," I suggested, trying to shake off the feeling creeping in at the back of my mind. But as I turned to look more closely at the photographs, I couldn't help but notice the unsettling vibe that clung to the air. "Let's just see what else we can find." "Jake," Sarah's voice trailed off, her expression a mix of fear and curiosity. I could tell she was trying to put on a brave face for me, but the tension was thickening between us. "Just a little longer," I urged, excitement bubbling within me as I stepped deeper into the cabin, unaware of the darkness that awaited us. As we stepped through the creaky old door of the cabin, an oppressive atmosphere enveloped us. A foul, musty odor assaulted my senses, making me gag slightly. I held my breath, trying to ignore the discomfort, while Jake, filled with excitement, seemed to be in a world of his own. "Can you believe this place?" he exclaimed, his eyes gleaming with curiosity. "It's like something out of a horror movie." "Yeah, a horror movie that we accidentally walked into," I muttered under my breath, glancing around the dimly lit interior. The walls were adorned with strange symbols that seemed to writhe in the shadows, and old photographs of missing people hung haphazardly, their faces twisted in expressions of despair. My heart raced as I felt a chill creep down my spine. "Look at these pictures," Jake said, stepping closer to one that depicted a woman with long, dark hair. "What do you think happened to them?" "Maybe we should leave," I suggested, my voice barely above a whisper. "This place gives me the creeps." "Come on, Sarah. Where's your sense of adventure?" He leaned closer to the wall, tracing one of the symbols with his finger. "These could be ancient markings. We could be uncovering something incredible here." I shook my head, feeling a knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. "Or we could be uncovering something we're not meant to find. Let's just go back." Ignoring my plea, Jake continued his exploration, moving deeper into the cabin. I stood frozen for a moment, torn between my instincts and his unrelenting curiosity. I took a deep breath and followed him, though every fiber of my being screamed to turn back. In the far corner of the room, Jake spotted a dusty diary perched on a shelf. "Look at this." He pulled it down, sending a cloud of dust into the air. "It's ancient. Maybe it's best not to open it," I urged, stepping back uneasily. "We don't know what we're dealing with here." But he was already flipping through the yellowed pages, his brow furrowing in concentration. "It's just a diary, Sarah. How bad can it be?" "Famous last words," I said dryly, crossing my arms as I watched him read aloud. "What does it say?" Jake's voice dropped to a hushed tone as he read a passage about rituals performed in the forest, dark and sinister. Each word seemed to resonate in the cramped space, amplifying the dread that settled over me like a heavy blanket. It talks about sacrifices and the forest being a part of something bigger. He looked up, eyes wide. "This is insane." "Jake, please," I said, my heart pounding. "Can we just go? This is too much." But he was already lost in the pages, oblivious to my discomfort. I glanced around the room, my unease growing. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist, almost alive, and I could feel a presence lurking just beyond the walls. "Jake, we should really—" Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from outside, causing us both to jump. I clasped my hands over my mouth to stifle a gasp. What was that? I don't know, Jake replied, his excitement fading into concern. Maybe it's just an animal. Let's check it out. No way, I exclaimed, panic rising within me. We can't just go outside. We don't know what's out there. Just stay here, okay? I'll take a quick look, he said, moving toward the door. I grabbed his arm, desperate to hold him back. Jake, please. My voice trembled. I don't want to be here anymore. This place is wrong. He sighed, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. All right, let me just finish this passage. Then we'll go. He returned to the diary, but I could feel my anxiety spiraling out of control. The walls seemed to close in, and I could no longer ignore the growing sense of dread that wrapped around me like a vice. Jake, I started, my voice shaky. I really think we should leave now. He finally looked at me, his expression softening. Okay, just give me a moment. But as he returned to his reading, I could feel my heart racing, the shadows whispering dark secrets. In that moment, I realized that the cabin held more than just its physical presence. It was a dark reflection of our fears, and I feared what lay beyond those walls more than what lurked within. As I flipped through the dusty pages of the diary, the scent of aged paper filled my lungs. The words jumped out at me, sending a chill down my spine. The rituals must be performed under the blood moon, I read aloud, my voice echoing in the silence of the cabin. Each line seemed to weave a darker tapestry of dread, and I could feel Sarah's unease mounting beside me. Jake, maybe we should just, she began, her voice trembling. No, wait, I interrupted, my curiosity getting the better of me. Listen to this. The forest hungers for souls, and the offering must be made. What do you think that means? Sarah's eyes widened as she backed away slightly, pressing her back against the wall. It means we should leave. Right now, she insisted, her voice rising in pitch. I swallowed hard, sensing her fear. But what if it's just a legend? Just stories to scare people away? I glanced back at the diary, hoping to find some rational explanation. Look, it's probably just some old folklore. People get scared and start making things up. Jake, this isn't just folklore. This is serious. She took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling rapidly. I don't want to be here anymore. Before I could respond, a sudden dragging sound outside caught both our attention. It was faint at first, like something heavy moving against the forest floor, but it grew louder, each scrape sending spikes of adrenaline through my veins. We exchanged terrified glances, the atmosphere thick with tension. Did you hear that? Sarah whispered, her eyes darting toward the window. Yeah, I replied, my heart racing. It's probably just an animal, right? But even as I said it, I knew I was lying. The sound was too deliberate, too menacing. Let's go check it out, I suggested, trying to maintain a facade of bravery. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to find, but the urge to confront whatever lurked outside was overwhelming. Are you crazy? Sarah shot back, her voice a mixture of panic and disbelief. We can't just walk out there. What if it's nothing? I interrupted, trying to sound more confident than I felt. We need to see what's going on. We can't just hide in here. With a shaky breath, Sarah nodded reluctantly. Okay, but I'm staying close to you. We crept toward the window, the old wood creaking under our weight. I peered out into the dim light filtering through the trees. My heart sank as I caught a glimpse of movement just beyond the tree line. A shadowy figure shifted, its shape indistinct but undeniably large. I think I see something, I murmured, my voice barely a whisper. It's hard to tell what it is. What does it look like? Sarah asked, her breath hitching. I can't quite make it out. It looks like it's watching us, I said, feeling a chill crawl up my spine. The image of the figure was unsettling, like a grotesque parody of humanity, blending into the dark woods. Jake, we need to leave. Now, she insisted, her eyes wide with fear. I know, I know, I replied, trying to calm her down. But we can't just run out there. We need a plan. As I spoke, I felt a wave of claustrophobia wash over me, the walls of the cabin seeming to close in. Sarah's breathing quickened, and I could see her anxiety mounting. What if it's not just an animal? She whispered, trembling. What if it's something worse? Sarah, look at me, I said, turning to face her fully. We'll figure this out together. Whatever it is, it can't get inside without us letting it. We just need to stay calm. I don't feel calm, she replied, her voice breaking. I feel trapped. I reached out, taking her hands in mine. You're not trapped, okay? We're in this together. Just breathe with me. I tried to guide her through slow, deep breaths, but her panic was palpable, and I could feel my own heart racing in response. Jake, I can't. I need to get out of here. Her words were laced with desperation, and I could see that her mind was spiraling. Let's just focus on the door, I suggested, trying to redirect her thoughts. If we can get to the door quietly, we might have a chance. Do you think it hurt us? She asked, eyes darting back to the window, as if expecting the figure to burst through at any moment. I don't know, I admitted, my voice low, but we have to try. I could see the conflict in her eyes, fear battling with the desire to escape. The dragging sound outside continued, a haunting reminder that we were not alone, and I knew that whatever lay beyond those walls was about to test not just our courage, but the very foundation of our relationship. Peering through the grimy window, I felt my heart drop to my stomach. There, just beyond the threshold of the trees, stood a creature that seemed to defy the very laws of nature. A grotesque mishmash of man and beast, its sinewy body twisted in unnatural angles, glistening with a sheen of something dark and wet. I could barely make out its features, but the way its eyes glowed with an unnatural light sent chills cascading down my spine. Jake, what are you looking at? Sarah's voice trembled, pulling me back momentarily from the edge of my horror. I quickly turned to her, my face pale, struggling to find the words that could encapsulate what I had just witnessed. There's something out there, Sarah. Something wrong. My voice was barely above a whisper, and I could see her pulse quicken, her breath hitching in her throat. What do you mean? What did you see? She stepped closer to me, her eyes wide with fear. I could tell she was on the verge of panic, and I needed to keep her calm, to keep both of us calm. It's a creature. I think it's stalking the cabin, I said, trying to sound more composed than I felt. We need to think of a plan. We can't just stay here. Sarah shook her head, stepping back from the window. I don't want to be here anymore, Jake. This place, it's wrong. We should leave. Her voice quaked, and I could see the conflict in her eyes. The cabin, with its eerie symbols and unsettling photographs, was weighing heavily on her. I know, but we can't just run without a plan. If we go out there without knowing where it is, we could walk right into its path. I took a deep breath, my mind racing. We need to figure out how to distract it. Maybe we can draw it away from the cabin. Are you serious? Sarah looked at me incredulously, her fear morphing into frustration. You want to lure it away? That sounds insane. It's better than sitting here waiting for it to come to us, I insisted, trying to keep my voice steady. We need to find a way to escape together. The creature growled outside, a low, rumbling sound that reverberated through the cabin walls. I felt the vibrations in my chest, and I knew we didn't have much time. Listen, I said, gripping her shoulders. We'll figure this out. Just stay close to me, and whatever happens, don't lose sight of where I am. As I contemplated our options, I could see Sarah's breathing was becoming erratic. Jake, I can't do this. What if it catches us? What if? Sarah, I interrupted, my voice rising slightly. I need you to focus. We can't let fear take control. Remember what we talked about. We can handle this together. She nodded slowly, though I could see the doubt lingering in her eyes. Okay. Just be careful. I will, I promised, my heart racing as I turned back to the window. The creature had moved closer, its grotesque form now partially illuminated by the dim light filtering through the trees. I could see its claws digging into the ground, as if it were sizing up the cabin. "All right," I said, taking a deep breath. "I'll make noise to draw it away. You stay here, and when I give you the signal, you find a way out the back. Just remember, stay quiet." "I don't like this, Jake. I really don't," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I know," I replied, my heart aching at the fear etched on her face. "But we can do this. Just trust me." I stepped away from her, gathering my courage as I moved toward the door. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn back, to hold her close and escape together. But I knew that wasn't an option. The creature outside was a threat we couldn't ignore, and I needed to protect Sarah, even if it meant putting myself in danger. I took a deep breath and stepped outside, the cold air biting at my skin. The woods felt alive with tension, and the growl of the creature echoed in the distance, a haunting reminder of the danger lurking just beyond my vision. "Stay hidden, Sarah," I called back, my voice firm as I began to make noise, stomping my feet, knocking against the cabin, anything to draw its attention. The creature's growl grew louder, and I could hear it moving, the sound of branches snapping under its weight sending a fresh wave of terror through me. My heart raced as I prepared for the worst, praying that Sarah would find a way to safety, whatever that might look like. The darkness surrounding us was closing in, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, not just by the creature, but by our deepest fears lurking just out of sight. As the creature's growl echoed through the trees, a chill ran down my spine. I turned to Sarah, my heart racing. "We need to split up," I suggested, though the words felt heavy in my mouth. "I'll draw it away from you. You can find another way out." Her eyes widened, fear flickering across her face. "Jake, no. I don't want to be alone. What if something happens to you?" I stepped closer, taking her hands in mine, feeling the tremor in her grip. "I'll be fine. I promise I'll come back for you. Just trust me." My voice softened, desperation creeping in as I tried to assure her. "You're stronger than you think, Sarah. You can do this." Taking a deep breath, she nodded, though I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. "Okay, but be careful. Please." "Always," I replied, forcing a smile to lighten the tension. I leaned in, pressing my forehead against hers, drawing strength from our connection. "I'll create a distraction. Just remember, if you hear me scream, run." She chuckled nervously, the sound echoing in the dank cabin. "You're not making me feel better, Jake." "Fair point," I admitted, trying to mask my own anxiety. "But I'll be right back. Stay quiet and keep looking for a way out." With one last lingering look, I stepped back, allowing the weight of the moment to settle between us. As I moved away, the cabin felt more oppressive, the air thick with dread. My heart hammered in my chest as I stepped cautiously toward the door, listening intently for any movement outside. The creature's growl reverberated through the trees, a reminder of the danger lurking just beyond the cabin's walls. "Okay, Jake, time to be brave," I whispered to myself. I grabbed an old chair and flung it across the room, the wood splintering against the walls. The sound echoed like thunder, and I felt a surge of adrenaline course through me. "Come on," I yelled, hoping to draw the creature's attention. The growl intensified, and I took a couple of steps back, peering through the grimy window. I caught a glimpse of the creature shifting in the shadows, its grotesque form slinking closer. It was then that I realized it wasn't just a beast. It was a reflection of my own fears, my insecurities about our relationship, the doubts that had crept in during our time together. "Sarah," I shouted, hoping she could hear me. "I'm right here. Just keep looking for an exit." I could see her silhouette in the cabin, moving cautiously. I wanted to run to her, to hold her close and shield her from whatever horror awaited us. But I knew I had to keep the creature occupied. The growl morphed into a series of guttural sounds, and I felt my stomach twist. "Hey, you ugly son of a..." I tried to taunt it, but my voice wavered. The creature paused, its attention fully on me now. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to appear braver than I felt. "That's right, over here." With that, I darted around the cabin, knocking over furniture in my wake, creating as much noise as possible. I could hear the creature crashing through the underbrush, its growl growing louder. Each step felt like I was running deeper into a nightmare, but I had to protect Sarah at all costs. "Come on, you overgrown nightmare," I shouted, my voice breaking. "You think you can scare me?" I tried to project confidence, but inside, I was terrified. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to find Sarah and escape together, but I knew that wasn't an option. Suddenly, I heard a sound that froze my blood, a crash from the back of the cabin, followed by a series of frantic footsteps. My heart sank as I realized that Sarah was still inside, and the creature was no longer just my problem. It was hers too. The thought sent a jolt of panic through me, and I pushed myself harder, desperate to buy her some time. "Sarah," I shouted again, trying to keep the creature's attention. "Just find a way out. I'll be right here." I turned and faced the door, ready to confront whatever was waiting for me outside. The tension in the air was almost unbearable, and I could feel it tightening around my throat like a noose. What if I couldn't keep her safe? What if I couldn't face my own fears? The creature was out there, and I was about to run into a darkness that seemed to echo with my own insecurities. But I had to try. For Sarah. For us. And the cabin felt like a tomb, its oppressive silence wrapping around me as I stood alone in the dim light. My heart raced, each beat echoing in the stillness. I could hear the creaking of the old wood, a constant reminder that I was trapped in a place that was far from welcoming. "Jake," I called out, my voice trembling slightly. The fear of being alone gripped me, and I could almost feel the walls closing in. I paced the floor, my feet shuffling over the dusty boards. Every creak seemed to mock me, and I fought the rising panic that threatened to overtake my senses. I needed to focus. Jake was out there, trying to distract that thing. I knew I had to find a way out. The very thought of him facing that creature alone filled me with dread. "Please be safe," I whispered to myself. As I scoured the cabin for an escape route, my eyes fell on a small, warped door at the far end of the room. It was partially concealed by a tattered rug, and an inexplicable urge drew me closer. I hesitated, my breath hitching as I reached for the handle. The cold metal sent a shiver down my spine, but I pushed it open. The door creaked loudly, revealing a dark trapdoor beneath the floor. "Do I really want to go down there?" I muttered under my breath, my voice barely above a whisper. The darkness below seemed to beckon, promising an escape from the horrors above. But the thought of what might lie beneath filled me with dread. I bit my lip, torn between the fear of what might await me in the shadows and the desperate need to flee this cursed place. With a surge of determination, I grasped the edges of the trapdoor and pulled it open. A musty smell wafted up, and I peered into the abyss. My heart sank as I saw a small, dimly lit room filled with personal belongings, clothes, photographs, and other remnants of lives that had been lost. Each item carried a weight of sorrow that pressed down on me, overwhelming me with despair. "Oh my God," I gasped, stepping back in horror. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from above, jolting me from my thoughts. My heart raced as I scrambled back toward the main room. "Jake," I shouted again, panic lacing my voice. I had to find him. I had to know he was okay. Meanwhile, Jake was outside, the creature looming before him. It was a grotesque amalgamation of man and beast, and as he stared into its eyes, he felt a jolt of recognition. "What are you?" he yelled, his voice cracking with fear. The creature snarled, its breath hot against his skin, and in that moment, Jake understood. It was a reflection of everything he feared about himself, about their relationship. "Sarah!" he shouted, desperation clawing at his throat. He could feel the weight of his insecurities pressing down on him. Would he be able to protect her? Was he strong enough to face this horror? Just as he prepared to make a move, he heard her voice echo through the cabin. Jake. Relief washed over him, but it was short-lived as the creature lunged forward, forcing him to react. Stay back, he yelled, brandishing a nearby branch like a weapon. But as he faced the creature, he realized that running wouldn't solve anything. They needed to confront it together. In a moment of clarity, he remembered the diary, the rituals described within its pages. We have to perform the ritual, he shouted, hoping she could hear him. It's the only way to break this. As if responding to his call, Sarah burst into the clearing, her eyes wide with terror. Jake, we need to go now, she cried, but as she caught sight of the creature, her breath hitched. Sarah, listen to me, Jake urged, stepping closer to her. We can't run. We have to face this together. It's a part of us, our fears. We need to confront it. With a nod, Sarah felt a surge of courage. They began to recite the words from the diary, their voices trembling but resolute. As they spoke, the creature writhed, its form shifting and twisting until it morphed into a grotesque version of Jake himself, his face twisted with doubt and fear. No! Jake shouted in horror, the realization crashing down on him. The true battle was not against the creature, but against the insecurities that had haunted him all along. Jake, we can do this, Sarah urged, clutching his hand. Together, they faced the creature that was now a mirror of Jake's darkest fears. As they stood united, the realization hit them. They had the power to overcome this together. With a final, resounding chant, the creature let out a deafening roar, then dissipated into a cloud of shadows, leaving only silence in its wake. Breathless, they turned to each other, their hearts pounding. Did we escape? Sarah whispered, fear still flickering in her eyes. I don't know, Jake admitted, his voice low, but we faced it together. And as they stepped out of the cabin, they couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows of their fears were now a part of them, lingering just beneath the surface, waiting to be confronted again.